Hey, what's up, guys? It's Epiphanies here again, and I'm just bringing in some more Mgtow content. I really didn't have a mind to make this video until recently, because when I saw the headline of Jordan Peterson apologizing to Mgtow, I figured it was just not even going to be a backpedal. It wasn't going to be a genuine apology, even if an apology was said verbatim. I'm sorry that. I really saw this as more of him seizing a platform to reinforce his beliefs and opinions, and that's not an apology. That's just, you getting on your soapbox. So let's get into it.
Is there an instance where you feel you said something that appeared to be true to you at the time, and knowing what you know?
Yes, I think I was a little. I think I was a little dismissive of the men going their own way, because I think I called them pathetic weasels, and I had my reasons for that. My reasons were.
So no matter how many times I watch this part of the clip and I try to go in with a neutral mind frame and thinking he's just here to make an apology and say his piece, I can't help but see right after he says, dismissive of the men going their own way, that he smiles. He gives this arrogant kind of, I guess you would say, inward smile. And he smiles to himself. And there's even a slight visible smile after he says, I call them pathetic weasels. So to put a bow on what I'm trying to say is that he was perceived as dissing an entire demographic when he wouldn't use their chosen pronouns, and he was seen as being, authoritarian, draconian, and just this evil person. And that was not what was going on. That definitely wasn't the case. And then we have him kind of in more than a few ways actually doing that to a demographic of Mgtows, where he's putting down an entire demographic, and he's saying, in a sense, he's saying all of these people are bad, or even most of these people are bad. And his smile that I see is that he's gotten away with it. He was actually able to diss an entire demographic, and he was able to come out Milhouse and just, smile about the whole thing. That's what I see.
Roughly speaking,
Who are the men going their own way, just for context?
Well, they're a group of people, mostly on the net, who've been burned in their relationships, or who conceptualize themselves as having been burned in their relationships, and they believe that the legal structure, in particular, in Western countries, is so tilted against men, particularly in family disputes.
So here, I love the idea that anybody else's tragic past, or anything that you would have, that you carry with you as far as being wronged by another human being, or in this case, in the family court system, a group of human beings, that it's all up to another person's perception as to whether you went through a bad situation. So when he uses the term conceptualize, he's essentially saying that we're romanticizing our tragic events, but it's not romanticizing, it's a cautionary tale. It's giving it its due airtime and saying, this is what happened to me, and, for the love of, anything, just don't let it happen to you, and here are the signs to examine. There's nothing, well, I can't conceivably see what would be wrong with someone saying, hey, here are all of the grids in the minefield. These are the quadrants you want to avoid if you're willing to go down that path, which I'm not. Well, what's wrong with stepping away from the minefield? It's asinine. So before we go back to the clip, let's address his comment about most Mgtow and those people being men who are older, and that they're mostly on the internet. So it feels, once again, it seems like he's trying to make us all out to be tinfoil hat wearing weirdos, and that's just, of course, not the case. The voices that the voices that speak out are the voices that are going to be heard, but that doesn't mean that there's the silent minority suffering in silence, essentially. So why not help those people out? That's the whole point of any kind of protest, or bringing or broaching an issue en masse, is to talk and say that we're not a minority, or even if we are, we collectively are speaking for the people who want to speak out. And that's why we're here. That's why we're saying anything to begin with.
Situations that and divorce settlement, that it's safer for men not to establish permanent relationships with women, not to cohabit with them, ever.
So here's what I'm confused about when he, repeats these statements that a lot of Mgtow have made, is when it comes to cohabitation, when he says that it's bad for anybody to propose that a man should never cohabitate with a woman in this environment because of how risky it is. So what I'm trying to say is, what's the alternative? He's saying that you can't cohabitate with a woman because she's going to literally, in a sense, invade your life and literally just take over. She's going to completely dominate your money, your time, and even what you're allowed to think about. You're not even allowed to hypothetically think about other women. You're not even allowed to think about, a hypothetical situation in the future where you guys might be broken up and you might be dating her best friend. Oh, because that hurts her emotionally. So what I'm saying is I've never met one girl that proclaims herself to be the gold standard. And the gold standard would be a woman that doesn't engage in a practice that disenfranchises a whole other demographic or another human being, even if it was down to one person where they said, I love this person. This man is my man, and I would never hurt him this way because I love him. I've not met one woman who's ever motivated that much with actual love, that it's self-actualized to the point where she wouldn't act in her own interests to another person's detriment. So to put an old-timey label on that, it's called a woman's prerogative. I've had roundtable discussions with my entire family, and then some of them in singular, and nothing but excuses have been made for every time I was hurt by a girl. I seemingly did everything right, and they would just cut me off emotionally, and it was dismissed as a woman's prerogative.
And they're a large movement. Now, how large they are, I don't know, but they're large enough. And they have what I would regard as an undue influence over relatively bitter and resentful young men who haven't had great success in the dating market.
It's almost as if he himself suffers from some type of delusion that when he takes on the Mgtow argument and all of the things that we say that are literally not refutable, that he looks and says, essentially, the system is this, rabid dog, and he says, oh, the dog's not so bad, you just have to know how to approach it. And most importantly, his mainstay of delusion, as all of these kind of people do who speak out against Mgtow, they always think to themselves, then they look to themselves as the ultimate example and say, it didn't happen to me. So they look at the system as a rabid dog and go, oh, no, the dog's not going to bite me. This wouldn't happen to me. So therefore, because I feel secure, you should feel secure. And that's not transferable. So when he says undue influence, the same amount of undue influence that Bill Nye the Science Guy has over, literally just throwing literal genetic science out the door and saying, oh, well, gender is a spectrum somehow. We're not saying any of that hokey, crazy stuff. We're only relaying things that happen in observable reality. Also, when he talks about the young Mgtow and saying that the reason why he feels they've gone Mgtow is lack of success in the dating market, it reminds me of a news report when, the recession really hit and people lost their jobs left and right and they couldn't find a job. And I was one of those people. And I saw this backhanded, self-serving news report that said the reason why people aren't able to find jobs is because we're addicted to failure. Oh, we love that high of getting on our suit and tie and going into the interview and then sandbagging it. That we're addicted to that cycle of going through interviews. I hate interviews. there's nothing you can do short of putting a gun to the person's head, and then even then it would be temporary. But getting back on point, I hate interviews, and that was one of the biggest lies I've ever heard on mass media. And this is I want to say it was during YouTube, but that's where there were just mostly cat videos and people doing cover songs of the latest pop songs and what have you. So I'll say this about his commentary about young Mgtow. Nobody likes failing, for one, and failure is just an exterior factor that's observable by everybody else, which is why they're so dismissive. They're just like, oh, you failed. But what I'm keying in on in this instance is the unempathetic nature that we have here in the Western world, and specifically in America and in Canada. We all seek to steal and usurp people's victimhood, whether it is legitimate or illegitimate. There's this weird thing that rises in all of us when we see a person, in a handicap, section. What's the first thing we think? Oh, that person better have a handicap placard, or you might not take action, but you'll definitely think less of them. We look actively for ways to think less of the people around us. And maybe it's just a cheap psychological mechanism that we've acquired from our environment that we just want to bolster ourselves and make ourselves feel better. But I'll admit, I don't know how it comes about, but I'm seeing it everywhere, and it's not good. Okay, so I'm going to end part one of the commentary here because my computer took a dump, and I'm having to do this on my iPad Pro, and it's telling me that the length of the YouTube video, if it exceeds a certain point, it's going to be too long. I think it's between 30 and 26 minutes, but, either way, I'm just erring on the side of caution. So I'll continue my rant/review of his apology in the next excerpt. So see you guys then.